Hello and welcome. This is my first sort of live solo workshop demo panel thing I've done. I'm Morgan Hazelwood, and today I'm going to be talking for Preptober about outlining for planters. So according to my local NaNoWriMo's Facebook poll this week, about 2/3 of all NaNoWriMo participants are planters. If you're unfamiliar with the term, there are three basic types of writers. There are the planners who have outlines and character descriptions and scene reports and all this sort of paperwork and stuff they've prepped in advance. They have planned out everything. And on the other hand, you have your pantsers writing by the seat of their pants. They sit down and follow the story, figuring out where it goes as they go along. And then there's the rest of us, the plantsers, who do a little bit of planning and do a little bit of writing by the seat of our pants. Obviously, the entire thing is a spectrum, like most things in life. So there are a few things I like to know before I get started because I am a plantser. I need to know before I write my story, unless I want to restart it 5 times, where I'm starting. I need to know where plot-wise, what's my inciting incident? What is happening? I need to know, secondly, where I'm going. What is plot-wise the closure of the story arc? The big main one that's going on. Because if I don't know where I'm going, it's really hard for me to get there. And my first novel I wrote without having a concrete endpoint, or my endpoint was actually too many plot points out. So I basically did a mic drop, pencil drop at the closure of a story arc at like 131,000 words. So knowing where I'm going can help me get there faster. Third thing I need to know is obviously who is in my story. I need to know who my characters are, their dreams, their hopes, what they look like, and everything in between. And I need to know what my setting is. For some people, the setting is as strong as another character. For me, my setting is more of a mood, but in my upcoming NaNoWriMo project, it might be a little more than that. We'll have to see. I'm going to pause right now and say hello to MM Ward, who said hi in the comments. So thank you for coming, everybody. I really appreciate it. So those are the 4 things I need to know as a plantser before I get started. Where I'm starting, where I'm going, who's going there, and where they are, where they're located. So I'm going to be talking about world building next week and character building the last week of November. But today, my big focus is on plot. Now, I could have done these in any of the order. For me, as a reader, I am very plot focused. I want to know what's happening. But I'm also very character centric. I like to know why they're doing this and really get in their head. When I'm writing, sometimes I stay a little too much in the character's head. So that's something I personally need to watch out for. And I love world building, which is why you very rarely will see me writing in the real world as it is. I have a contemporary fantasy, but it's not the real world as you know it. I really enjoy the world building aspects. That said, there are plenty of people out there who love world building and do so, and their writing is almost an excuse to explore their world, in which case many of them end up doing D&D sort of supplemental guides, creating worlds for other people to play in, which is a great place to go if you just like creating new worlds. So I kept switching around in my head if I wanted to do the characters first or the setting before I did the plot, but all of them intertwine and build on each other. So I feel if I start on my plot today, that will help out with both my setting and my characters. So hopefully it will all come together in November. We'll just have to wait and see. Usually I do this sort of prep work on my lunch break at work, but I wanted to share it with you, and my lunch break moves all over the place. So that's why you get me Sunday evening. So planners, when they get ready, they basically know who does what, when, where, and why, and all the different scenes. And when they sit down to write, it's basically just fleshing out the story. And this can make for super fast writing times, unless all of the planning was due to writing insecurities, which is a completely different thing. Hello, Doc. We have another fellow planter in the audience. Hello. So that's the planners. And the pantsers, you know, sometimes they just sit down and see what happens. Sometimes they have a character idea or a story idea. Maybe it's a road trip, so they just start throwing things on the paper and see what sticks. It's very often for them, basically, and they get to explore. It's exploratory writing. And sometimes they explore what they want, and sometimes they explore what their subconscious wants them to. I feel that's true for most writers. When I've gone to panels and discussions with professional writers, a lot of them say that I didn't realize this at the time, but looking back at book one or my first 5 books, I realized they were all about finding out who you are, PTSD, dealing with trauma, you know, just different things that they were working through in their lives at that time, even if they didn't realize. For me, themes work best when you find them in the story and then maybe hone them. But when you build them into the story as the point to the story, you often come across as after school special, and that is not, it's the plot and everything exists to teach a lesson, which nobody really likes being preached to. So how does my process work? I do super high level outlines, like, you know, I've had outlines where one chapter just says denouement or encounter the soldiers. You know, it's not very detailed. But so I do my super high level outline, and then when I sit down to write, I completely ignore it until I get stuck. That doesn't mean that the plot points that I wrote down aren't already in my head. I have where I'm going. I have some idea of what I'm going to hit on the way there, but I don't focus on it. I don't write to my outline. I just figure out that starting point, that probable end point, and logic my way on all the in-between steps. So in the comments, I see MM Ward talked about how they were a planner that left places for them to pantser write so they could stay excited about the stories and find avenues around plot holes or writer's block. And then everybody told her that meant they were a plantser. I think most writers are definitely somewhere on the planter spectrum. Some of them may be like, oh yeah, I do tons of planning, but I'm not really a planner. It's just playing with the world and stuff like that. And some of the pantsers are like, oh, I don't plan, but I know who my characters are and I know what type of story I'm telling. And so it really is a spectrum. And I don't look down on either side. And the secret to writing is once you know how to write one book, you know how to write that one book. And just because you've been a planner in the past or a pantser doesn't mean that's always going to work for you or your next story. Different stories have different needs, and you might mentally, emotionally be in a different place and need a different method. So if something isn't working for you, change it. as I like to say at my day job, processes exist to help us achieve things. If the process isn't helping us get what we need done, then we should change the process. We shouldn't force what we're trying to do into the process, and because that can slow things down if it's not right, if it doesn't work for what we're trying to achieve. So just because you've done it one way doesn't mean that you're committed to always doing it that way. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the story that I'm working on for NaNoWriMo, and then I'm going to take a 15-minute break and actually outline the sucker. So I write fantasy. I've done a gender-bent Robin Hood. I've done a YA coming-of-age story on a non-Earth planet with magic and stuff. I have done a contemporary middle grade story, school plays, and standardized tests. And what you read affects the world around you, at least temporarily. So I like world building. Clearly, I like playing with what ifs and all that sort of thing. But when I read, I love science fiction and fantasy and romance and, okay, lots of stuff. But I thought about the fact that I've never been drawn to anything science fiction when I write, even though I enjoy reading it. So I was like, well, how could I do science fiction? Fantasy in space. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I am drawing my inspiration from, well, I'm a huge fan of myths and fairy tales. That's part of the reason I am a voice for a folktale podcast, a Nazi storytime / spider storytime. So this is based on a colony of cats, which is a traditional myth. There's going to be, I believe, a Baba Yaga sort of character, and I am going to be on another planet. I'm with a lot of fairy tales and stuff. You end up with sort of that whole fae and time where you go to the fae world and you come back 7 years later or 21 or what have you. To try and play off of that, I'm going to have the main character's parental figures doing some time travel themselves, not traditionally time travel, not another world, but they're going to have signed on to a contract with maybe a mining company or something. I'll figure it out. And they're a pilot. And so because of the time dilation from the faster than light travel, it's going to be so many years for them, but 21 years for their daughter who's left on the planet. And so they see these almost unaging parents coming back to visit very sporadically. So I'm going to get some feel of almost a fae-like when they're gone. My main character used to be on a family ship, and medical bills, I don't know, something caused parents to sign on to a corporate ship. I think the old ship broke down. And they had to sign on to pay bills and stuff like that. And they left behind the main character's aunt, who doesn't have a name yet. So everybody's aging on the planet. So that's going to be fun. And instead of cats, I said it's based on the colony of cats. In the fairy tale, you have a girl who goes off to is mistreated horribly by her stepmother and her stepsister and runs off to live with the cats because in their town that's what happened. And she cares for the young ones and the old ones because they're not great with like opening bottles and cans of tuna, etc. And all of the cats thrive while she's there, and eventually she feels sad and feels like she wants to go home because there's only so long you can live with just cats. So the grandfather cat takes her down to the basement and says, which would you rather be dipped in, the jar of oil or the jar of gold? And she's so modest and says, the jar of oil. And the cat's like, no, you're much too good for that, and dips her in the jar of gold, and she comes out with her clothes sparkling and her hair glittering and coins all in her pockets. And he tells her on the way home, if you hear the donkey bray, look the other way. If you hear the rooster crow, look towards it. So on the way home, she follows directions, and bam, she gets a gold star on her forehead. And she comes home, and her stepmom and her stepsister are thrilled to see her. She brought money with them, her. And, you know, just because they were abusive doesn't mean they didn't care for her. And things are always easier when you can afford to eat. So, but after a time, her sister's like, I want some of that myself. And she goes off to the cat colony and thoroughly neglects her duties. And the first time grandfather cat visits, it's like, come to the basement with me. Which of these jars? And she says, the gold, and gets dunked in the oil, nearly drowns. And she follows her directions and looks at the donkey's bray and ends up with a tail coming out of her forehead. While she was off during that 1 month, she'd been dropped down a well for a day, and the local prince found her and they decided to get married. It's a fairy tale. Anyway, so sister gets back and the marriage is about to go through, and when the carriage shows up, they have dressed the sister and with a veil to hide the lack of golden star. And the cats are meowing as the carriage rides. And the carriage driver's like, do you know what they're saying, Prince? And the prince is like, no. And they're saying, meow, meow, look behind you. Your true bride is behind you. So he rips off the veil. They go back, they rescue, and happily ever after. So that's the basic story that I'm using as my inspiration. But I'm on another world. I'm not having cats. Cats are very cliche. Their cats in space is very overdone. I'm going with octopuses. Because octopuses are really, really clever. If they started to, you know, actually keep eating after giving birth to babies, they might actually live longer than 3 years. And if they did, they would definitely have taken over the seas. So in my world, I'm going to have her helping the octopus people with, you know, things that tentacles aren't as good for. So world building says I need to figure out how they mastered space travel with tentacles, and, you know, probably really hard to fire and steel and things that require heat. So they might have co-evolved a sentient species with something else on the planet. I don't know yet, but I'm going to figure that out. So the main gist of the plot is that she wants to be a pilot like her parents. She wants to get the family ship back and get everybody together. And so she's working for them to get a scholarship to go to the pilot school, and she's saving up money because if she goes to school the other way, then she's sold her life away for 21 years like her parents did, and that's not what she wants. She wants the ship free and clear on her own. So that's about all I've got in my head right now. So I'm going to go ahead and do a writing break and see if I can get all these plot points written down. So is anybody else working on their NaNoWriMo story right now? Or are y'all just watching me babble and work on it myself? So we had a Kelly join us. Hello. Doc is with me on the Planter spectrum. Ward has reassured us all that red pandas are so cute and so smart, which is true. Doc agrees, cephalopods in space. And Ward is going to be working on some stir fry. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see my little productivity timer. And I'm going to go ahead and work on this outline and see what I can get done. Okay, I was down to the wire getting this outline written, but I have something. I started off with some paragraphs of just maybe the situation and who's involved, and then I started outlining. Do y'all want to hear my outline, or should I just go more into the whole process? Because I've got another step coming. While I outline on my own, I have been known to use beat sheets from Save the Cat in order to check my pacing. One of my biggest concerns about my writing is my pacing, which is one of the reasons you are very unlikely to see me in a sort of critique circle with anything longer than a short story, because what I really want to know is about my pacing and that sort of thing. And it's really hard to get that when you're exchanging a chapter at a time. So I come up with my story. I outline where I think I'm going. And then I open up the beat sheets and I see if I'm hitting these points. Sometimes I don't even open up the beat sheets until I finish a draft. I outline the draft that I actually have written. So that's definitely part of my process, is outlining the draft that actually came out and then seeing how far it differentiated. But then using the beat sheet just to see how the pacing is and if it's got the right level of rising action. Well, I know that there are plenty of people out there who feel stifled by that sort of formulaic thing. A lot of them, because they're good readers, because they consume a lot of media, innately follow these patterns because this is what most people expect in good storytelling. We expect certain levels of action. We expect certain rises and falls. When you have things that are too high energy for too long, it's hard to hold that enthusiasm up. My favorite example is Matrix 2, where it opens with a 30-minute fight scene. I was on the edge of my seat, like getting me excited about anything, very easy. I'm an excitable person. Edge of my seat for the first 10 minutes. And then I sat back a little, and by the end of the 30-minute fight scene, I was leaning back, checking my watch, and wondering when the plot was going to progress. So you definitely want to make sure that there is rising action and falling action, and that you're not just go, 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 go. Some of my favorite series, I will complain if, say, they have a book that is entirely a fight scene, or the book only progressed the plot an hour and a half. So I like to know, I like things to happen. But I also think that it shouldn't just be combat the entire story or what have you. It needs to ebb and flow. So while I was working on my story, I see that Doc was considering doing either his third Crackle and Bang story with sky pirates over Southeast Asia, or an industrial magic steampunk story. M.M. Ward is deciding between two different trilogies she's working on, finishing them up. One is a werewolf contemporary, and the other is aliens facing extinction. And the NSA analyst turned ghostwriter who's trying to help them. And Sako tuned in to join us. Hello. She is all painted up for the online Renfest tonight. So okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my spreadsheet with you. Dun, dun, dun. Wait, no, I lied. I'm going to share my beat sheets with you. So here we go. So if you are unfamiliar with beat sheets, they are typically used, originally used with film and movies, but Save the Cat is a very popular book, and writers have adapted this for their own purposes. So you'll see as I go through this, you start off with the title, remember, this is just a thing in flux. A log line, just so you know your own theme. I think I'm doing a colony of cats in space with octopuses. I'm sure I'll come up with a better log line as I go along. Obviously, my word count for the completed novel is going to be closer to 80 to 100,000 words, because 50,000 words is only 200 pages, and that really only works for middle grade novels these days. So yeah, you've got, let's see, here's one of the most simplest beat sheets. You've got the opening image. This sets the tone, the mood, the type, and scope of the project. The before snapshot. Second story plot point is the theme stated. A secondary character poses the question or the statement to the main character that ends up being the theme or the point of the story. Next is the setup, to introduce or hint at every character in a story. Plant character tics to be addressed later on. So, you know, those bad habits or good habits that will come full circle. Now, remember, anything that you are setting up, you don't have to do on the first draft. You can go back in and add it later. No one from the outside will know what order you did these things. Plot point 4 is the catalyst, the life-changing event that knocks down the house of cards. So this is that lovely inciting incident. There's the word. Okay, and then there's the debate, the point of no return, where the character is making a choice. They have to decide if they're going to do something about the problem or live with themselves not. Act 2, we have a strong, definite change of playing field. Do not ease into Act 2, make it with a bang. And this is where you may introduce a B story. Now, remember, this is all for if there's one main character. If there are multiple main characters, typically you're going to find each new character means that your story, in order for their arcs to be complete, unless they're more of a tertiary point of view, is going to add at least 30,000 words to your story if you're going to do them justice. So for the B story, this is often the love story, but it doesn't have to be. And it gives us a break from the tension of the main plot point. And it carries the theme and often uses new funhouse versions of characters. Next, after the B story is introduced, we have fun and games. The promise of the premise, the heart of the movie, all about having fun. I find these workshop sheets on jamiegold.com, but this is from Save the Cat. So if you have that book, this should be in there as well. jamiegold.com. Let me pop that into the comments. I'm a huge fan. I love these. Even if I ignore them for the initial, I will use them on the edit. And after the fun point is the midpoint, the threshold between the first half and the second half. It can be a false peak or a false collapse, where the stakes are raised and the fun and games are over. And in my head, I'm mentally mapping all of these things to my first manuscript, because I know exactly what each of these things are in that one, because it exists. After the midpoint, we have the bad guys closing in. The bad guys have regrouped and they're sending in heavy artillery, or whatever the challenge is, ups its stakes. Maybe a snowstorm if it's man against nature, you know, that sort of thing. So the hero's team begins to unravel. Flail. 11, we have the all is lost moment. Opposite the midpoint, we have a whiff of death. The old way of thinking dies. We give up. There's a runaway moment, false defeat, no hope. This is the gut punch moment. Then we have the black moment. This is separate from the all is lost. It is the darkest point, with the MC having lost everything they wanted. Then we get to Act 3, where we have the A story and the B story combine into to build on each other and reveal a solution. The finale is the wrap up, and we dispatch all of the bad guys in ascending order, working our way up to the boss. And the final image is the opposite of the opening image, and it shows how much life has changed. All I can think of when I hear this is the shawarma scene in Avengers when they're just sitting there like and eating the food. So these are the beat sheets. And so I have my outline, and now I'm going to take what I have and adjust it to fit. Nobody said they wanted to see my outline, so we'll skip over that. Did anybody else work on their outline while I was talking over this? Or while I was working on mine? If so, please raise your hand. I'll give you a minute. So, okay. Well then, thank you for coming out. Y'all gave me plenty of time to work on my outline, and it now exists, which is great because November is getting close. So have a lovely evening. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at Morgan Hazelwood or on Facebook or wherever. Have a great evening and good luck with your NaNoWriMo project. Bye-bye.